Welcome back to a new episode of DevJour. Today we're going to be going over how to create some additional routing, how to add style sheets, and how to kind of pretty it up a little bit. And then we will finally go into, in the next video, how to add Axios and go into a third-party API that you can pull data from instead of using like a sample JSON file that we're using here. But let's get started. Okay, so we need to start adding in some files. So let's do constant users JSON equals, let's do database users.json. Okay, so now we're able to grab this file, users.json. We want to be able to parse it. So on the list users, we're going to do response.send file users JSON, and then we're going to pass just the root so it knows which directory we want it to display in and to parse. So now if we refresh this, users. So this needs to be users. Okay, currently it's not displaying anything, but if we open this up and we added something to it, so let's say like test person example at example.com. And now if we come over here and refresh this, you can see that it's displaying our JSON the way that we want it to. So it's just basically just displaying the file right now. What we're going to do is update some things in it. So let's say we want to do another route called list. And right now it's not going to work. So let's do router.get list. And then we're going to do request response. And you can see this thing's going crazy as I'm talking because every single time I'm typing in something, my editor saves it like every second. So it's reloading it every time it saves. Okay, so let's do response.render. We can just copy this one. So response render, and instead of doing pages index, let's do pages list. And then let's say this one's list users, which means we also need to go in here and create a page. So let's do rename list. And if we refresh, now this page works. So let's go in here and actually kind of modify what's happening. So let's keep the card body. And let's throw in an H1 and say all users. And right now it's not going to show anything because it's blank. So let's see how that looks. That's fine. Okay. Let's do a table and give it a class of table. Table striped. And table ordered. And this is just going to be setting some actions for us to be able to type into. So let's do name, phone, and actions. It's just going to be setting up the table for us to use because we're going to be calling everything into it in just a second. So tbody. All right. So now inside of this, underneath this div, we're going to do script, and we're going to use fetch to pull it. So we're going to do fetch, and we're going to call that URL route that we just created. So list users. Then we are going to return the response. And then we're going to parse it as JSON, so response.json. And then after this, we're going to do then, which is going to now be the data of what's being returned. And inside of this, we wanted to add something to this body, which this is just standard vanilla JavaScript. It's not really node related. So you've seen some of my other tutorials where I've done this before. So I won't go into too much detail. I'm just going to kind of talk while I'm writing it out. So let's do let table equals document.query selector tbody. Let users equal data. And then we're going to do users dot map. And we're going to be passing the user. So this is kind of like our for each loop inside of this JSON. And let's do let row equal document.create. So document.create element row, and then row.append child. And we just want it to append a TD. So we're going to do document.create element. And now we're going to do the TD. And for the first one, we're just going to do text content equals user.name. And then let's go ahead and copy this basically 3 times. And text content, we're going to do username, phone, and then instead of here, we're going to do, instead of text content, we're going to do inner HTML. This is going to equal just a link to edit it or whatever. So we'll get all of that information in just a second. Okay, so now we are gathering our information. We want to do table, append child, row. Okay, so right now it's not going to show anything because there is no data that's being produced. So I'm going to just add some dummy generic data inside of this. So let's do let's do ID1. So normally you would be pulling this from a database or an API. I'm just showing you how to do it from a local standpoint. But if you had an API, which you're going to be using later with Axios, you would be able to pull it from an API instead of having to pull it from a JSON. This is just for descriptive purposes. You don't necessarily have to do it this way. I mean, if you want to, I'm showing you how to, but you don't have to. Okay, so let's do name dev drawer, and let's just go ahead and set up a password as well, because we're going to give them the ability to edit these user accounts. So let's do password, and let's just set it to password. And finally, phone can be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0. Okay, so now if we refresh this, okay, oh, JSON is a function. There we go. Okay, so now it's displaying what we need. So, all right, cool. Now, what was going? Oh, so right now we're just displaying this JSON script of what would essentially be coming from an API, or you're pulling it from a database on your own, or you're just using JSON files for some reason. But this is where you would be able to get that data at. So let's go ahead and edit this. So we're passing an ID to it. So we're going to do /edit user /user.id for the edit. We can also go ahead and create this, and let's create one for view. So let's just do /user, make it view, and then finally, actually let's go ahead and split these up, put a little pipe in front of them, and let's create another one for delete user ID, delete. Okay, so now if we refresh this, we can see this. If we click on this, it's not going anywhere because obviously this page has not been created. So let's create a new route for it. So let's do router.get and we're gonna do how do we want to do this? Let's just do /user /ID, and then we're going to do our request response. That needs to be parentheses, not curly brackets. So request response, and we're going to essentially just do the same thing we got here. So let's do response render pages view, and we need our function. Okay, and then this is going to be let's do just view user. Okay, so now in our files, let's take what we have here, rename, and it's going to be view view EJS. Okay, so let's take this and do user info. And if we refresh right now, it's not, no, I killed my server. Too many wrong things. Okay, so user info is just going to be displaying the same content that's coming from the list of all of them. So instead of doing that, I want to, let's get rid of this table. And we're going to create a span ID equals name. And let's do break tag small em full name. And let's just go ahead and add another one of these and separate it like this. Okay. So we don't want to pull from the list of users. It's not going to pull the information that we want, because we want the information to now be pulled based on this user ID. So let me change these real quick. Phone. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to go back to our index.js, and inside of here, we're going to create another route that's called list single. So let's grab list users, change this to list single. Now we are going to be using the FS functionality that we added to it. So let's do const fs equals require fs. Okay, so now that we're going to be using that to actually pull the JavaScript for, not the JavaScript, the JSON for us, let's go ahead and create another variable here, and we're going to call it body parser. This is going to equal require body dash parser. Okay, so this it actually parses out the JSON that we're going to be sending from our view. So I'm going to restart our server because apparently I errored it out when I was doing that. So in our list single here, we can get rid of this because this is not needed. What we're going to do is modify this, and it's going to be list single body parser dot JSON. And then we're still sending over the request and the response the same way that we were. But the body parser JSON is going to be taking whatever we send from this script and pushing it out as a JSON object that we can hit here, because we're going to be using it to filter it by the ID. So let's do fs read file. And you can also do read file sync. So we're going to be using read file in this case because we're not looking to, I mean, it doesn't have to be the most up-to-date, accurate information you have, whereas sync would make sure that it's syncing up with the file that you're pulling it from. But since we don't really care about that right now, we're not going to worry about that. Okay, so now we are reading the file users.json. So let's let users equal json.parse, and we're just going to parse out the data, and then let result equal users.filter, and then we're going to do user with user with the arrow function, and we're going to do something like if.userid equals request.body.id. That's what's going to be getting sent over to us. And the reason I'm doing 2 equal signs instead of 3 is because they're not the same type. So this is actually an integer, whereas this one will be coming over as a string. We could come up here and convert it from a string to an int, but I'm just right now this would be the way that it works fine. You can do that if you want to. This is just basic, JavaScript at this point. Okay, so return user, else we just want it to return false. And then finally, we want the response to be a JSON version of the result. Okay, so now this should send us the information that we need based on the body ID, which would be the ID that's up here. So let's go back to our Vue.js and let's get rid of all of this. And we're just going to do something simple. So first thing we need to do is get const URL equals window.location.url, not URL, href. And then we want to do const ID. We're just going to do url.substring url.last index of, and we're just going to grab that ID, so +1. Do not need a comma there. Okay. So now let's just run a generic fetch. So this is going to be list single is our route. And then inside of here, we're going to do a method post, which while I'm doing that, that reminds me, in index.js, this is not a get route, this is a post route. So we're posting to it, and then our headers, we're going to send over content type application JSON. And then finally, we're going to do body JSON.stringify, and we're just going to pass in that ID that we are already gathering. And then down here, we're going to do our then functions. So then response, we're just going to return the JSON. So response.json. And then we're going to use the data to fill up our divs at the top. So let's do document dot query selector, and the first one is name, and these are just going to be text content. We're not wanting to modify the HTML, but they're just going to be displaying something. And then we're sending over a single object in an array, and dot name. Then let's do the same thing for the phone. So phone text content equals phone name. Okay, so let's turn our server back on and refresh. There we go. So now we have content coming from this. So let's go back to list. And if we click on this, we can view it. Okay, so now we have where we can view a list of users. So let's say if we had another user in here, so let's put a comma here and put in ID2 sample And then let's change the phone number. So if we so where's my comma go? I know it goes in there somewhere. ID 2, name, sample, password. Okay, it's just because I had an extra comma at the end of it. Okay, so now if we click on this, that'll bring us to user ID 2, which is the sample information that's being pulled from our JSON script or JSON file. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of that for now. Now, let's create our navigation just so we can kind of start navigating around the site. So let's go up to nav here. We're going to create a nav section. Let's just wrap it in a div for bootstrap purposes. And then let's do slash home. Actually, let me do let's do 2 more. So we're going to have where we can list the users. So list the users, and then let's say we want to add a user. So let's do add user. Okay, so now we save that, refresh, and we have our navigation up here at the top, which I mean, it's not perfect, but it does what it needs to do. So home, list users. If we hit add user, obviously it's a 404. So let's close this, and close that and that. Okay. So let's do the edit user page and route. So let me close this too. Okay, so let's do add user, not edit user. Okay, let's go down here. Let's do router dot get add dash user request response. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing like a common theme between our routes that we're able to add. Actually, so common that I'm just going to copy this page. So let's do response, and instead of list, let's change this to add user and add new user. So it's not going to show anything here because we don't have that page created yet. So let's go into, let's just do the view for now. We're going to copy that, rename, add user. Refresh, there we go. So now we kind of have something going here. All right, so let's take this, change to add user, and then we can add in the form functionality here and inside of the script down here. So let's go ahead and delete all of this. Okay, so now that that's gone, let's go ahead and just create a form. So we're going to do form, and we actually don't need an action for it because we're going to handle the submission through JavaScript. So let's do label, and I don't need all this either. This is just a demo. Normally you would have that on there, but I'm not going to keep that on there for now. Okay, so form, and then let's do input text. So let's do name, ID. So the name is going to be name, because that is one of our variables. Let's also make the ID name. Let's give it a class of form control. Okay, so now, here, making it hard for myself to read. Okay, let's add a break tag. And let's see how this looks. All right, so that's how we want it to go. So now let's do the next one. Let's make it phone. And we're not going to do any validation on this. I've done other tutorials with validation, so we don't need to do that on these. phone, and let's do password, and this is going to be type password, the name and the ID. I'm going to change that to password as well. Okay, so let's refresh that. All right, looks good. Let's call this submit new user, and let's do class equals btn primary, btn large, coming from Bootstrap, and submit. Okay, so that should give us a form now. So now what we want it to do is, in our script, we want to handle the form submissions. We're going to do document dot query selector submit new user dot add event listener, and then we're going to listen for the click event. We're going to pass the event so we can turn it off so it prevents the default function. So let's do prevent default. Now let's declare our variables here. So we're going to do const name, and this one's going to be document dot query selector, and we're going to use name dot value. A little bit jQuery leaked out on me. Okay, so now we have our name. Let's do the phone, and do the phone here, and then we're going to do password and password here. Okay, so now that we have the variables, we do want to check if they're filled out. So we're going to do if name or phone or password. So if they're not filled out, we're just going to do an alert, and let's just say please fill out all fields. Otherwise, we're going to run our fetch, and we're going to make it go to a route called add user. So let's go ahead and set up that route. So this is the add user URL, but we also want to have the one that actually adds the user to the JSON file or API or whatever it is, but this is going to be adding it to the JSON file itself. Okay, so we have add user. Again, we're going to do body parser.json because we're going to be grabbing some variables from it. We're going to send over the response, request and response. Let's see, what did I do wrong here? Oh, because I need to have a function. There we go. Okay. Thing was going crazy for a second there. All right. All right, so let's do let users equal JSON. It's going to be very similar to what we did up here, but we're not going to use the fs read file that way. We're going to parse it because we want to iterate through it and basically turn it into an array, add something to it, and then save that array back to where it was. So let's do fs read file sync this time because we want to make sure we're getting the most up-to-date information. The user's JSON, we want it to come over as UTF-8. And then, okay, so now we're grabbing that. So let's let users, we want to make sure we're adding it to the end. Let's see, ng length equals parse int users.length. Users.length plus 1. So we're just making it where we're adding the key is going to be the next value, because right now the if you look at the users, it's based on this ID here. So again, this isn't necessary if you're pulling from an API. You would just hit the API routine, but in this case, we're modifying this JSON script so you can look at this. Okay, so let user, and then we're going to be adding to that array. So we got ID is going to be user's length. The name is going to be request dot body dot name, and then we're going to do the same thing for the phone and the password. So let me do this, phone, and then we go down here, do this. Yep, click there. And again, I'm not validating this. You would validate it on, the JavaScript side of it, but just for testing purposes, I'm not validating this. So use validation on your own. Okay, so now we're going to take what we just added and we're going to push it to the original users array. And now we're going to do write file sync to make sure, again, it's syncing users JSON. And then we're going to JSON.stringify the users array that we have. And then we're going to do return response.redirect. And then we're just going to make it go to the list so they can see that it was added as part of the list. So now on the file side of it, we need to pass this information. So let's go back to our add users. And inside of our fetch statement here, we're going to do we're going to do method post. And we're going to pass the headers. So content type application JSON. Let's see, comma, body. We're going to be sending over the variables that we're creating. So JSON stringify, and the variables that we're sending over are name, phone, and password. So once we get done adding what we want to it, we need to now come in and do a then statement and validate our response. I keep forgetting my function. Okay, so if response dot redirected, if response redirected exists, we want it to do a window dot location dot href, and then we're just going to point it to the response dot URL. Okay, so now let's try this out. Okay, so let's just refresh there, and let's say we're going to do test 2. Let's go backwards this time. And password, submit, list. All right, cool. So that added it just the way we wanted it to be added. So we got test 2, the backwards phone number. And if we go to view it, it's showing the information that we're looking for. So now if we go to add users or add user, we can see it. So we can take what we've done here and actually make a edit user EJS as well. So let's change this up. So I duplicated that. We're going to do edit user. And let's change this to edit. So, all right, let's add us a quick route kind of for the same way that we did the get. We're going to do that for edit. So we're going to do edit dash user. And then it's going to be pages edit user. Let's also change this to edit user. Okay, so now let's go to edit this user, edit user 1, and now we have our page available to us. So now we just got to get the content added to this. And the way that we're going to do that is we are going to, how do I want to do it? I think we need to, edit user, we're going to have two calls in it. So this one as well as the view. So where we're fetching this single, we're basically going to copy all of this and we're going to paste it above this. So we want the, let's change this to edit. So we want the button to still do something, but we want it to load the user information first. Okay, so we can change this to value. Change that to value because it is a text box instead of a div. And then we can also come in here and change this to password. Because we're essentially doing the same thing that we're doing whenever you list the users and you view them. We are wanting to do the same thing here in the edit, where we're pulling that information based on the user that you're selecting. So if we go to test2, it'll pull the information from test2. And now we want it where whenever this button is clicked, it kind of does the same thing that we did for the add user, but it's going to be hitting a different route. In this case, it's going to be hitting a edit user. And let's go ahead and also add in, because the, what is it? The ID is also going to be parsed here too. So if it, let's see, I'm trying to figure out my line of thought here. So if the ID doesn't exist, so if it's not pulling anything back, it'll just redirect or show an alert or something like that. So we're just going to do an alert right now that says you are missing your user ID. And then let's just have this return. Actually, I probably need to add a return on the add user as well because we don't want it to continue to go down. So let's do return here as well. Okay. So now we have it where we need to be grabbing the ID. So ID equals document, and we're going to actually add that ID to the form. So we can just grab it like this. Let's see. Wait, what did I do? No. Oh yeah, that'll work here. What I was thinking I was doing was this part. So document.query selector ID dot value equals data 0 dot ID. Okay, so now we have our ID, name, phone, password, and then here we're grabbing it from the form. So let's, in our form, let's just put a hidden field. So we're going to do input type equals hidden, and the ID is ID, and let's just go ahead and put on the name as ID as well. Okay, so now let's refresh this, and if we inspect this, we should have a hidden ID value 3 that matches our ID up there. Okay, cool. So far, so good. Okay, so now back down to the edit. So we want to validate that there's an ID when they go to submit the form. We also want to validate that they're filling out all the forms, and then we want to hit the edit user. We're going to do a post, and then we're going to stringify everything. We need to add the ID in here as well. And then this can stay the same too. So let's go back to our index, and now we need to actually edit the, or create a edit user route. Okay, so we got this one. So let's do router.post, and this is going to be /edit user. Again, body parser.json. And then we're going to do request and response. Okay, so now we have our edit user. We can probably duplicate most of this. So let's just go ahead and add this in there, and then we can edit it. So we're wanting to pull the user's JSON file. But instead of doing this immediately, or instead of doing this at all, we're not adding to it, so we need to do a loop on it. So we're going to do a for var I equals 0, I is less than users dot length, and then we're going to do I plus plus. And this is not a, it's a, there we go. Okay, so now we're going to look through, and it's going to loop through each one of these, that way that we can grab the ID for it. So now we're going to do if users I dot ID, and now this one we're going to use parse int to make it where it's actually what we're looking for, request.body.id. That's what I was talking about earlier, where we're using the 3 equal signs to make it where it's, it's actually parsing it as an int, because before it wasn't, which actually I'm going to go ahead and do that up here too. Let's see, where was that at? Here. So let's do equal, so we make them equal the same type. Okay. Okay, so now we're checking to see if that ID equals the request body ID. If it does, we want to update the user ID dot name to equal request dot body dot name. Same thing with these. So name, it's going to turn into phone. This one's going to turn into click, and this is going to be password. Okay, so if we look at our users JSON right now, we can see it was edited. All right, so that's good. And gonna break out of this. Okay, so now once we get done, we are going to write file sync. We are going to stringify it again, and then we're going to do a response redirect. Okay, let me see. I have a feeling I mistyped something, but I guess we'll see when we get there. All right, so now let's just change this to 3 and add something else to the end of this and hit submit. It did not update it, so let's see why it did not update. Let's see, console, and let's get rid of the end of that. Okay, so hit submit. Oh, it did update it. I wonder why it's weird. Okay, let's refresh it again. I thought it updated it. Let's try that again. So test 3, submit. Okay, it changed it to test 3. So what if we change this to this and change this to 4? Okay, I have no idea why it didn't work the first time, but it is working now. So we have our view, list, edit, list, add. So all of this seems to be working. So now let's handle the deletion of a user. Okay. So we don't need to have a page for it. So let's just go over here and see that that's being updated fine. Let's get rid of this and this because we do not need those where we're going. Okay, so now we're going to do router.get because the delete is a get URL. So delete. We need to do slash, and I think we'd said it was delete user in the route, and then we're going to pass the ID to it. Okay. So now we have a delete user ID, and if we click on this, it's not going to do anything because the page doesn't actually exist. So let's do fs read file. And I believe whenever I was testing this out, I couldn't get it to work with read file sync, which may just be a me problem. You can try it, but the way that I'm writing it right now seems to have worked while I was testing it. Okay, so now we're going to be grabbing that file again, and we're going to do let users equal json.parse data, and then users.filter user, and we're going to be searching for the user that matches this ID. So we're going to do if user.id equals this parse int see request dot params dot id. So we're sending over the request parameters for it. So if the user equals this, we can do console log just to test it out here. Okay, so if we hit turn our server back on, delete. Okay, so it is hitting that. So the user ID, it is telling us that it is hitting inside of this. That's a good sign. Okay, so now that we're in there, let's do users.splice users.index of user 1, and then we're going to do fs. So basically the user splice is taking the index of this current user that matches, and it's splicing it, so it's taking it out. So now let's do write file sync, and again we're going to do users JSON json.stringify users. And then once that is done, we're going to do response.redirect, and we return that. Else, we're going to return false. Okay, so now if we reload, wait, let me make sure I'm deleting. Okay, so this is going to be ID 3, so we hit delete there. Let's see where it's breaking. It is going to delete dash user, yes. Maybe it doesn't like the return there. Okay, so delete user there. Okay, so it's apparently not liking the response redirect because it seems like it's removing it from the user's JSON. So if we go back over here to list, we can see that it is gone. So let's add a new user. Let's do test example. Submit there. And then if we look over here, we have test example. If we hit delete, it's removing it and redirecting it. So apparently it just takes a few seconds for the server to catch up with the code. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete that out of there too. And it's all happening in real time. All right, cool. So now I think that that's all of the pages. So I mean, that's the basic functionality of it. Let me show y'all how to do the Sass. So let's, I mean, I've showed y'all this before, but let's do just real quick inside of this. So I'm gonna watch Sass, and it's gonna generate a CSS file. And in my Sass, I'm just gonna customize a few things. So let's do something like, actually, you know what? I have this already written down somewhere, so I'm just gonna copy and paste. You can customize it how you want to. But, so you can see over here, it's generating this style.min.css. And inside of our header, I'm just going to add a reference to it. So this is going to be /CSS, style min CSS. No, don't need it in the CSS. Actually, yeah, we don't need it there because there is a reference. So right now it's not going to pull anything. But if we go back to our server.js, like we opened in the very beginning, we can add another variable somewhere in here. So let's just put it right here. So let's do app.set. And the way that you do this, it's pretty simple. You're going to do express.static. And then we're going to do path dot join. So DRR name the same way we did before in CSS, and that is going to create a reference to the CSS file. So if we go to view the page source here, this is not a set, this is a use. There we go. Okay. So again, it's referencing out the CSS. You could do the same thing with JavaScript. So you could do something like this. I mean, we're not using JavaScript, but you could essentially just put in a JavaScript folder here, add a JavaScript folder here, and then it would reference it with just the main slash. So now if we refresh, it gives it a little bit more prettiness to it, I guess. Okay, so let's get out of the Sass. I don't care about the Sass right now. And let's go back to our terminal. Okay, so now I'm just going to comment this out for now. Let me think. So this is, a quick way to kind of get some routes, but let's say if you had the need to create additional routes. So let's say inside of here, we want to create a new folder called sample. And maybe you're wanting to partition out your views and stuff like that. So maybe even inside of this, we have a new folder we can call sample as well. So now we have our sample routes and we have our sample pages. So inside of our sample page, let's say we do a new file, let's say index.ejs, and let's create another one called dev.ejs. So that means that we would need to have some pages that are like that. So if we go to sample right now, it shows us a 404 because that page doesn't technically exist because it's not set up the same way that these are. So let me close out of some of these files for right now and get rid of this, and we can get rid of this for now. Okay, so right now we have this routes defined for our I guess every route that we have so far. But let's say we wanted to create another one. We would do something like const sample require routes sample, and then we're going to be using the sample JS file. So new file sample.js. So, I mean, we could just have it where it's like this if it's referencing an index file in there, but let's just call it sample so you can kind of see some of the differences that they may pop up with. Okay, so let's say inside of this one, we currently don't have anything. So let's do router.get/sample and see request response, and we need to also, I forgot, we got to do our constant. So we got to do constant express equals require express, and then we're going to do const router equals express dot router. Okay, so now inside of this, we are just going to return the page like we did on the other one. So if we come up here to this, for example, we can just copy that. And instead of being pages index, it's going to be pages sample index, and this is going to be the sample home. Oh, inside of our server.js file, we need to also do the same thing that we did for this, and we're just going to keep it simple and make it use the same routing. Well, I know what's causing this. One of the things, so whenever you're creating a new route, you have to do module. So module.exports equals router. So now let's run it again. There we go. Now it's running. All right, now we have it listening. There we go. So now it is creating a new page for us. Yeah, this page is currently blank, so I'm just going to copy over this index to here, and we're just going to say this is the sample homepage. Let's give it a second to refresh. Also, we are now in a folder inside of the folder, so we can't use this. It has to be an absolute reference to it. And now if we refresh, there we go. So since we're inside of a folder, we have to go outside the folder. If there is a better way to do that, I would love to know. I did a little bit of research because I'm not extremely familiar with Node. I've used it before, but not extensively, as you may be able to tell in this tutorial. But that's the way I've found out that we can do it. If there's a better way to do it, I would love to know what that better way is, because this right here would get very annoying, especially if you have multiple levels deep. Okay. Okay, so now we have this sample homepage. So let's take this and we're going to paste it over here, and we're going to be able to do sample dev, which is currently not showing anything because we don't have the router set up for it. So let's do router.get. Let me just copy this, and it's going to be sample dev for the router, and sample dev get. Okay, now let's refresh. There we go. So now this is the dev page is working. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it right now. In the next tutorial, I'll go over how to add Axios and be able to pull something externally, but I think I want to hold that off. It's going to be a short video, but I think this one is long enough, pretty close to an hour. But thanks for watching. If you have any questions, or if you look at the code and you see something that I am not doing right, please let me know, because like I said, I am still learning Node a little bit. So I could definitely use some help, but I think for now this is going to do it. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.